So, we all know how video games can have deep plots and introspective qualities. That's not exactly new. Narrative-driven video games have existed since the SNES, or even before, depending on what you consider to be a narrative. Nintendo was also no stranger to narratives with their own games, though it was a bit different. Their games had some kind of narrative, but the purpose of the narrative was often to give a suggestion of why the player is doing what they are doing. No one playing Mario actually cared about saving the princess, but it gave them a reason to know why they're doing what they're doing. Because of limitations, as well as experimentation, these narratives were very often simple back in these days. In the 3D era of video games, narratives kept persisting and got even better, though it seemed like most Nintendo games still stuck to simple narratives. Then Ocarina of Time comes out. Ocarina of Time was one of the first truly narrative-focused Nintendo games, and some people still say it's the greatest game ever. Ocarina of Time was one of the first truly narrative-focused Nintendo games. It seemed like a vessel to test their creative ideas and see how they can implement great narratives and stories into a game that relies more on the gameplay than the story. It turned out great. Ocarina of Time was, for a kid's game at least, pretty philosophical in its meaning, conveying ideas through small dialogues, atmosphere, and contrast between different time eras. Ocarina of Time had a great balance between its narrative and its gameplay, because it was still a gameplay-focused game. After a bit of time, Nintendo wanted to create another narrative-driven game that was still mainly focused on the gameplay, and that's how Wind Waker was born. A joyous story of how a young boy faces his fears and crosses the great seas. But this video isn't actually about Ocarina of Time or the Wind Waker. In fact, I think we actually skipped over a game in this franchise. Alright, you knew this was coming, let's just get to it. A youthful boy walks through the forest on horseback in pursuit of finding an old friend. This boy was once a great warrior who stood face to face with evil and banished a great malevolent king into darkness, protecting the world, usurping the title of Hero of Time. But the world does not remember this boy as such. He defeated the evil king as an adult, and after he defeated this great evil, he was sent back in time to relive his childhood, free of all burden, and while he had saved the world did not remember him at all. As he walks through the woods on his horse, a mysterious imp wearing an odd-looking mask steals his horse. The boy chases the imp until falling down a huge pit. At the bottom of this pit, the boy wakes up and the imp is waiting there for him. The boy realizes he has been cursed by this imp and now takes on the form of a forest creature. Navigating through an ominous area, this boy ends up through a twisted tunnel that leads to a clock tower basement. A door closes behind him, and now he's stuck in this odd, unfamiliar place. This is how the game Majora's Mask begins. The game has barely even begun, and the main character has already lost a lot. He's lost his human form, being stuck in this forest creature form, which did grant new abilities, but also denied him other abilities. But there's a certain horror of being trapped inside of a different body, now with a new set of constraints. He can't jump as high, he can't express himself as easily, and he's also been locked away from his homeland. And though now the masked imp has gone someplace else at this point, when he initially cursed the boy, he taunted him, making fun of him and humiliating him. Walking up the clock tower, a man interrupts him. Just as hope has been lost, the mask salesman creepily asks a request: retrieve a mask for him and he will return the boy back to his normal, human form, but only under one circumstance. He completes the task in 3 days, as that is when the salesman is leaving town. So, as the player, we have been offered a bit of hope, but then almost instantly, another burden has been placed, a burden of time. Video games often place big burdens on the character, like in Ocarina of Time, where you literally have to defeat the incarnation of pure evil that ruined the world. Majora's Mask sort of places a similar burden later, but also adds the stressful element of time, giving a sense of realism. This is also a mechanic that puts off a lot of people, meaning not many people really get to experience this game. Now, as the player, You're given 3 in-game days to just wander around, finding out what you can do. The salesman gave you a goal, but no instructions, and instead just left you out in the open. As you try running around, you will notice a level of discrimination against you. Here is yet another burden or constraint placed upon you. The neighborhood dog attacks you, the guards don't let you outside the town, the shop owners deny giving you service of any kind, and many even refuse to look at you, and you feel really helpless. The speedrunning community of this game really hates this part. It's unskippable for the most part, and it's pretty long and boring when you know what to do. But these 3 days are integral to the narrative. The feeling of helplessness and confusion kick in, and you're basically out in the world in a way that feels humiliating and unfair, until you finally find a few things you can do. You can speak with an old man in an observatory who offers a comforting dialogue. You can get a magic ability to shoot bubbles, snot bubbles from your mouth, or like snout. I don't know if this hole on the design of the forest creature is supposed to be like a mouth or a nose, or kind of like. And you can also just learn what the town is like. Here's what you'll learn. There's a festival in 3 days, which coincidentally overlaps with when the salesman has to leave. Some people have left the town, and you learn an old myth about 4 giants. But there's something else too. At the observatory, or perhaps right when you walk out of the clock tower, you can look up and see the moon. If you know nothing about this game at this point, this design might just seem like a wacky and cool design for the moon, but through careful observation, you'll notice that it gets closer each day. And if you listen to how everyone speaks, and maybe why some people have left the town, you'll realize a morbid reality. This strange world, this fever dream-like world that you've mysteriously been transported to, is going to die. There's already a bit of stuff to unpack here. A German philosopher named Martin Heidegger suggests the idea of thrownness, saying our birth itself as well as the circumstances that we're born under, including status or wealth, race, geography, etc., is completely random and against our will, and all we can do is just cope with it. In Majora's Mask, you are thrown into the world, this world known as Termina. You aren't really given a role as the player, which is an important thing I'll be discussing later, but you are also placed into this strange world against your will. You have constraints placed on you, many of which seem unfair, and you don't really know why, but as the 3-day timer comes to an end, you are able to get to the top of the clock tower where the masked imp is waiting. Earlier, the imp had stolen not just your horse, but a sacred magical instrument from you, the Ocarina of Time. That's how in case you couldn't tell, that's how the other game got its name. You're able to retrieve this instrument, and after receiving memories from touching it, you'll learn to play a song. The Song of Time. You are then able to play the Song of Time, not with the Ocarina though, with these trumpets that come from your back, and I guess we're here the whole time, but we just didn't know that they were here. Probably because the aforementioned snout might not be able to blow air into the ocarina, so. Anyway, when you play the Song of Time, you suddenly lose everything except for a few items like the ocarina, and get sent back 3 days. Everything gets reset. You meet with the mask salesman who mistakenly thinks you've retrieved the mask that he asked for. Well, he heals you to your original form, then gets a little bit mad at you, invigorating shame within you for failing this task. He gives you another chance to retrieve it though, and even tells you a bit about it. It is a mask that holds ancient evil, known as Majora's Mask, which is how this game got its name. Sorry. Now, free of the burden of being trapped inside a forest creature's body, you're granted much more freedom now. You aren't discriminated against, and you're also finally allowed to leave town. Additionally, since the forest creature, known as the Deku Scrub, which I probably should have said a bit earlier, has special abilities, such as water skipping, blowing bubbles, snot bubbles, and gliding, you can use a mask that looks like it to transform back into it at any time. It is true that you don't owe this happy mask salesman anything, but with these freedoms being given back to you, you're sort of given a responsibility. It is unfair that a young boy is given such a heavy responsibility, but to have freedom is sort of to have responsibility, in some ways. Jean-Paul Sartre gives the idea that if you act in a certain way, you're basically declaring this is what a human should be. That acting selfish is setting an example for all of humanity. As you are a human yourself, you act according to how a human does, or how you think a human should. And if you take on responsibilities, This sets an example or a standard for all of humanity to take on responsibility, and likewise too, if you don't take on the responsibility, then that's what you think of humanity. So ignoring this looming fate by disappearing into the mountains, for example, and being ignorant while the moon is falling down to Termina, for example, is also a way of stating that your actions are what you equate humanity as. Denying the people of Termina a chance to live once more clearly is not the right thing to do here. You spawned here mysteriously and you don't really care about anyone here. It seems completely disconnected from Hyrule, which is the name of the land that you came from before, right? All these people look the same as in Hyrule, but they have different names and act differently. So what if Termina is just some sick and twisted nightmare? What do you owe these people? That's also a beauty of Majora's Mask. If you act selfishly, ignoring any nuance in how the people talk, refusing to build any connections with the characters, and not helping anyone, then you don't actually have a reason to help these people. You don't have a reason to beat the game. But if you do that, then as Sarter said, you're representing a bad image of humanity. Progressing through the main game, you'll learn that the myth you heard about the giants is actually true, and these giants are actually stuck inside each area's main enemy. Completing each dungeon will free a giant, and there are 4 in total. To stop the moon from falling, you need the 4 giants to lift the moon up, preventing the moon from crashing. To take a break from philosophical remarks for a second, this wackiness is kind of what gives Majora's Mask its identity. The Zelda franchise, or the Nintendo franchise entirely, is made up of a bunch of wacky characters and things like this, but this game practically runs off of wackiness. The essence of these freaky looking giants is stuck inside each temple's boss, and I need to free them so they can literally hold up the moon and stop it from crashing into this weird land? And apparently they know who the imp is, the imp with the mask, and they used to be friends with him. It's all like a fever dream. Anyway, you'll use your ocarina in every area to get around. An interesting mechanic is using a song called the Song of Healing to heal. It has many uses, but its main ones are to turn the essence of someone who has died or is dying into a mask. This mask that you get from putting these characters to rest contains all of their sorrows within it, playing a creepy cutscene every time you put on their mask. You carry their weight, and in a sense, you act on their behalf when using their form. Whenever you wear their mask, you transform into them. This is pretty creepy and pretty cool, but people have already discussed the philosophical implications of this to death, so I glossed over them. If you're interested, there's a plethora of videos to choose from. I think MatPat's video is a pretty safe bet. But anyway, let's talk about the side quests. This is where the main idea of this whole video lies, by the way. As I mentioned, as you gain more abilities, more side quests are open, and these side quests are pretty in-depth. Since everyone is on a time schedule, certain quests are only available at certain times, and it also gives a sense of urgency. For example, you can find a man named Cathay who was turned into a young boy from the powers of the imp, and you can help him reunite with his lover, Anju. Completing this quest takes 3 full days, an entire in-game cycle, and just as the moon is 2 minutes away from falling, they finally reunite. Another side quest has you help a farm girl named Romani fend off against strange aliens that she calls them, which is pretty ominous. You're able to get your horse back, and optionally you're able to help fight the aliens. If you succeed, then her sister, Cremia, will let you have a carriage ride with her. She shares some information about herself, offering a stronger feeling of empathy towards her and her sister, and then you have to defend against 2 evil brothers who try to rob the carriage. All the side quests in this game offer extrinsic rewards, but also consistently offer intrinsic rewards. The intrinsic rewards, or the rewards that are less materialistic and more about how they make you feel, are seen more often than extrinsic rewards, or rewards that offer an external item or tangible resource. For example, riding to the carriage with Cremia gives you the Romani mask, a mask that has no real use except for another side quest, but the act of doing the quest kind of makes you feel good. So we empathize with the characters, and that gives us a drive to beat the game. So what? That's the whole point of a narrative-driven game. But what's particularly interesting about Majora's Mask is the nature of the gameplay loop. When you help Cathay and Anju, you have to reset time or else you will die. And when you reset, so does Cathay and Anju. When you reset and go back to the first day, Anju will stare at you when you visit her as if she does not know who you are, still worrying about her fiancé. Helping Romani, then resetting, means that if you don't help her after you reset, you have to consciously allow her to be abducted by aliens in favor of doing other things. I know it doesn't seem that deep, but there's sort of a guilt that you feel every time you play Majora's Mask. There's a quote from Vinland Saga, said by a character named Canute. This isn't a spoiler, by the way. To love something is to choose it over other things, to prioritize it, even at the cost of others. Therefore, to love is to discriminate, to protect one thing by sacrificing or harming another. This quote may seem flawed, but in some sense it can be seen as true. The human heart does not come near to the required capacity to love all humans or things unconditionally. Love, in a sense, is finite, and if we spread it too thin, then nothing is loved. If everything is loved by us equally, then nothing is loved at all. So we sort of need to ration our love and give it mainly to those who we care about. This is definitely a controversial outlook, and one that I don't necessarily disagree with, but I do think it's not really a good idea to constantly be thinking about. But it can still be applied to Majora's Mask perfectly, but in a different vein, or more accentuated vein, I guess. When we love something, we aren't exactly conscious of the fact that in order to love, we need to sacrifice or harm something else, as Canute says, but in Majora's Mask, we are made painfully conscious of this unfortunate fact. Let's give an example scenario. You help out Romani and Cremia, then you have to reset time, as usual. You feel good that you've helped out the two. The next cycle, you do some other side quest, and out of curiosity visit Romani on the third day, but she's completely dazed. You let her get abducted by aliens. She does not remember the previous 3 days because the previous 3 days don't exist. You reset them. She was abducted, but you knew it was going to happen. You can't help this poor girl every single cycle. You consciously let this happen. And even if you do help her every cycle, you are denying some other character in this world your attention and help. Sure, this is a kid's game and it feels unrealistic, not just because of its fever dream atmosphere or weird and wacky elements, but also from hardware limitations, as well as at times awkward dialogue, but these NPC connections make you really think. But what's the point in helping them? When I 100% completed Majora's Mask, I did it mainly for intrinsic reasons. I don't really care about this random mask that I'm never going to use. But why did I? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I guess I wanted to meet all the NPCs and learn about the people of Termina, but it also felt like saving these people in one of the 3 days, only to go back in time, wasn't being heroic, and it was maybe being selfish. It was maybe so that I could feel a better sense of pride that I saved them, even though in all other cycles they met the fate that I claimed I saved them from, even after I completed their quest. Now, at the end of the game, this premise kind of negates itself. It was bittersweet, but mostly on the sweet side, which isn't for better or for worse necessarily. When you beat the game, a cutscene plays of all the people you saved. If you save Romani and Cremia, it'll show them happily dancing at the end. If you don't do that quest, this cutscene is actually not shown, and the same goes for all cutscenes like this. So does this mean that the whole thing about letting characters die and fail in favor of other characters redundant? Because they all get saved in the end anyway? Well, not exactly. First of all, if you don't save them, like I said, their cutscene doesn't play, meaning you are fully able to deny certain characters happy endings. But even if you do all quests, you still let them fail and die a bunch of times. If it takes you 9 3-day cycles to beat a game, for example, and you complete a character's quest once, that means that you have left them to fail and die 8 different times, most of which you likely knew about their fate and chose not to help in favor of other things. And while in the end they all have happy endings, a version of each of them branched off. I'll make a diagram, hopefully if I'm not too lazy when I edit this video, just to better illustrate this point. Let's just say in this timeline, you save Cafe and Angie, for example. Then you reset time. At the moment that you don't help them in this next cycle, the moment that you choose not to help them, a new version of them branches off, and you've effectively created a separate ending for the two lovers. Let's say this timeline is the ending timeline, right here, the one where they get saved. These are still different versions of them. This is definitely a stretch, but I hope you kind of get what I mean, that there still is a version of them that didn't get a happy ending. Even though they don't remember it, you still let them fail and die many times, or at least once or twice. Why do anything if in the end it doesn't matter? Is it to pass the time? Or is it to distract ourselves? Is it a mix of these things, or is it nothing like that at all? Just a quick tangent. That line in the script kind of sounds like a Dr. Seuss poem, and I did not realize that while I was writing it. Whether you can make a difference or not, and whether it matters or not, why do we do these things? We do things that we want to, and what we choose to do defines us. Life might seem like it has little meaning in it, and even a reason to live might not matter 100 years or even a few years after you die, but a reason is something, and since we're all here anyway, thrown into existence against our will, might as well try to do what we think is good. And remember, whatever you do sets a standard for what you think humanity is like. I think Majora's Mask doesn't as much resemble the real world as it does our own mind. Our minds are often a chaotic battlefield of reason, trying to justify all that exists in reality. There's certain things that we consciously avoid in our mind in favor of other things, and if we try to do everything at once, then we'll end up doing nothing. There's also the constant threat of our own morality and burdens that plague our minds at any given moment, like the moon. Though absurd is life, if we recognize that life is absurd and challenge unfair disadvantages or constraints, we may be fulfilled. Even if the boulder rolls back to the ground, Sisyphus may roll again. And as he rolls the boulder again, maybe treating his persistence as an act of defiance is enough to satisfy his heart for eternity. Thank you for watching this peak stasis video. So before the video ends, I know that most of the symbolism was likely a result of the narrative and probably largely unintended to be analyzed this much, but I think it's fun to overanalyze. Thank you to all of you who made it this far, and if you did, make sure to check out my other videos for similar content. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next peak stasis video.